Hello again, everybody. I'm Chris Mooneyham, and welcome to the TCA All Sports Report. As always, brought to you by Fox 5 Atlanta, 680 The Fan, and of course, the Touchdown Club of Atlanta. Big show. Lot of information this week. Long show. Stay with us because we've got a lot of great information and recaps on what was, without question, one of the great semifinal weekends in the history of Georgia high school basketball. And we've got recaps coming up next in What's Happening. "6A boys, let's start at McCamish Pavilion on the Georgia Tech campus, the number one ranked Wheeler Wildcats. With one of the finest players in the entire country, Jaylen Brown. He drops 29 points. They beat Tucker 76-64. Wildcats will face Pebblebrook. That's right, Pebblebrook, for the state title. Pebblebrook, for a lot of you out there, you may not realize, has had a great program the last few years. And finally, they've reached the state championship game. 6A girls, Norcross's Allison Johnson, one of the best low post players in our state, notches a double-double, leads the Lady Blue Devils to a 53-35 win over Parkview. They will face McEachern. McEachern's Taya Cooper hits a running left-handed shot. She's a right-hander, by the way. And the future Tennessee Lady Vol wins the ball game for the Lady Indians on that last-second shot. They beat Archer, and now they're on to the state championship game. 5A boys, Allatoona gets 20 points from Roger Davis. They beat Warner Robins 62-39. They'll face Brunswick, who won another dramatic ball game, 44-43 over Cedar Shoals. Stevenson continued the dramatics. They beat Forest Park 16-5 in overtime and 55-44 in the state semifinal matchup. They'll face the Lady Raiders of Maize, who took out Dutchtown. Maybe the best atmosphere across the state this weekend was over at West Georgia in Carrollton, where the Carrollton Trojans and Lady Trojans high school basketball programs just happened to be playing in the state semifinals. So, homestanding high school playing at the homestanding college in the homestanding city. What would be more dramatic than two dramatic last-second wins? Here's how it unfolded. Desmond Webb's free throw with 16.4 seconds remaining. Carrollton's boys knock out Cairo 48-45. Trojans going to face the defending state champions in Jonesboro down in Macon. The dynamic duo of MJ Walker Jr. and Tracy Hector Jr. combined for 51 points. And the Cards beat Liberty 71-43, and they'll have a chance to defend their state title. The Lady Trojans of Carrollton did not secure their first lead of their state semifinal win until Alicia North's bucket with 11 seconds remaining in the ball game. They beat Veterans 43-42. Lady Wolves of Buford will be their opponent. That's right, they reached their sixth state championship game in the last 7 years with a 51-39 victory over Fayette County. The most dramatics for one location, I'm very pleased to say, was in Columbus over the weekend. As I mentioned to all of you last week, I was very fortunate to be on the play-by-play duties in Columbus for the 2A and 3A classification just a couple of days ago. And I got to tell you something, folks. It was incredibly dramatic. In fact, I was privy to one of the great comebacks that I've ever called in my 20 years of high school sports broadcasting. It happened in on the 3A boys side of things. Where do I begin? With 5 minutes to play, the Jenkins Warriors led the Rutland Hurricanes. Let me find the score here. 64-48. There's a lot to remember from this ball game. 64-48 with 5 minutes remaining, a 16-point lead. Over the next 4 minutes, the Hurricanes outscored Jenkins by 17 points to seize the lead with a minute remaining. Then, Jenkins goes on to score 4 consecutive points and beats Rutland 77-73. They go on to the state champion 77-74, pardon me, let me make sure I get it right. They go on to the state championship game where they will face one of the most electrifying players in the state. Another great comeback as the defending state champions from Morgan County, led by one of the great players in the country, Tukey Brown. He scores 32 of his 37 points in the second half. He had 5 points in the first quarter, 3 in the first, 2 2 points in the second, and then goes for 32 in the second half. Finishes with 37. The defending state champions beat number 1 ranked Laney to advance to the state championship game. On the 3A girls side of things, Jacqueline Anderson for Beach High School comes down with 16 points in the ball game. Leads Beach to the victory. Lady Bulldogs going to face number 2 Laney. Laney put together a 13-0 run at the end of the first half to pull away from Decatur in their 63-37 win. 2A boys on Friday, that was kind of our precursor of drama leading into the massive games on Saturday. Again, I was lucky enough to be on the call for the 2A boys when Jordan Harris went for 22 points and led Seminole County to a victory over Vidalia. 59-56 the final in that one. Seminole County really dictated the pace and led the ball game through the entirety of that game, but Vidalia hung around and still had a chance to win it late. They'll face Crawford County, who got William Jarrell's 28 points and Markel Knowlton's 23 points. That's going to be an amazing matchup, by the way. Jordan Harris and Seminole County against Crawford County and Jarrell and Knowlton in the championship. Nationally ranked Holy Innocents gets double-digit scoring from 5 of their players. And the undefeated number one team in the state, tries to continue their run with the mantra of unfinished business. Remember, Holy Innocents 2 years ago lost in the state semifinals, went into the state tournament ranked number 1. Last year, undefeated, made it all the way to the state championship game as the number 1 team in the state for the second consecutive year, and then lost the state championship game. This year, number 1 team in the state, still undefeated, and now they're on to the state championship game. But they may be playing next week, and this is going to sound far-fetched for a lot of people because I'm talking about 2A girls basketball here. But in many ways, for people who follow Georgia high school athletics, it may be the most highly anticipated of all the championship games next week or this week in Macon. Why? Because they're facing the dynasty of Georgia girls high school basketball. That's right. For the 14th time in the last 15 years, the Lady Wolves of Wesleyan have reached the state championship game. Number 1 versus the Dynasty this week in Macon. 1A was actually relatively eventless. Pretty much every game was a blowout. 1A private boys, St. Francis, one of the elite 1A private programs in in the entire country. Really, I was going to say in the state, but they're the number 1 private team in the state. They're one of the most elite private programs in the entire country. They got 4 major Division I prospects. They were struggling at the outset of this ball game, but score the first 19 points of the second half and pull away for the victory. And they're going to face a really good Green Forest team in the title game. Another one of the more highly anticipated ball games is really all about one of the great rivalries in all of Georgia high school basketball. For the 11th time in the last 4 years, St. Francis and Southwest Atlanta Christian Academy are going to play each other. So that tells you right there that these two teams have met once or twice in the playoffs. In fact, in 2013, they met in the title game. Last year, I was lucky enough to be on the call of their matchup in Kennesaw in the state semifinals. And now again, they meet with the state title on the line. St. Francis and Southwest Atlanta Christian Academy in the 1A girls finals. 1A public boys and 1A public girls, rather eventless. Again, Calhoun County and Greenville both went easily on the 1A public boys side of things, and as did Taylor County and Turner County on the girls side. Coming up in 2 segments in the What's Next portion of our program, I'll have a full schedule for you as to the championship games in Macon. Ticket prices, schedule, where you can see and hear the games, that'll be up in 2 segments. But first, let's take a look at our positive athletes from the state of Georgia. Okay, we begin this week with Emma Erb. She's a senior girls lacrosse athlete at Blessed Trinity. Emma's been described by her coach as a well-rounded individual that focuses on service, scholarship, and character. As part of her servant's heart, Emma's taken part in her school's mission trips to Nicaragua, where she's helped to rebuild houses and visited orphaned children. Next up is Pat Abney. He's the varsity boys basketball coach at Pope High School. Nominated by his assistant coaches, Coach Abney is described as a leader that prepares his boys to become men, both on and off the court. It isn't rare to find one of Coach Abney's former players coming back to the program to thank him for the impact he's made upon their lives. And finally this week, Nate Bridges is a senior wrestler at Creekview High School. Although he's one of the leaders on the mats for the Grizzlies, he also finds time to manage a full course load of AP classes and is also very involved in his church and other local charitable programs. The time is nigh, folks. Remember that the nomination process ends at the end of March, so we're very close to the end of the nomination process, the awarding of the scholarships, the banquets that we'll have here in a couple of months. Again, March 31st, the end of this month, is the deadline to nominate a young person who contributes in your community, at your church, in your school, for your local teams. No matter the situation, someone out there watching knows a young person who deserves to be nominated for the process. And that's really the reason I bring it up, because remember, you out there, you the viewer, you're the key to the nomination process. You can have any sort of relationship to the young person that you want to nominate. You can be a boyfriend or girlfriend. You can be a BFF. It can be your brother or sister, or of course, your son or daughter. You can be their coach. It really does not matter. Just go to georgia.positiveathlete.org for further details. Again, that's georgia.positiveathlete.org for further details. March 31st, the submission deadline. Have you ever wondered who may be the best athlete in the history of Metro Atlanta sports? We may not answer that question next, but we will throw another name into the hat and tell you about one of the great athletes in the history of Georgia athletics next in Ever Wonder. For this week's portion of the program, the Ever Wonder portion of the program, I really love what Brad Walsh, our resident historian at the TCA, has decided to do. Starting a series, we're going to have a few series that are going to run throughout the weeks, throughout the years here on the TCA All Sports Report. And I especially love this one because it will spur conversation with the masses, people who will watch the TCA All Sports Report. Especially when you ask a question, who was the greatest Georgia high school athlete in Metro Atlanta history? So, as a part of that series, he throws out a very interesting name this week. He says, have you ever heard the name Anthony Flanagan? And I must admit that when I read this this week, I said to myself, you know, Brad, I haven't. I'm very intrigued, so let's find out about Mr. Flanagan. Brad goes on to say, if you ever grew up in Atlanta in the 80s, 90s, or 2000s, chances are you haven't heard of Mr. Flanagan. But if you grew up in the 70s in Atlanta, there's no doubt that you know he was one of the greatest high school athletes to ever play in the state of Georgia. Going all the way back to 1973 to tell the tale of a stellar high school athlete, Anthony Flanagan was known as Flan the Man. Now, that's a very 70s nickname if I've ever heard it. He was a three-sports superstar in both in football, basketball, and baseball. He led his Southwest High Wolves to 2 state titles in basketball and 1 state title in football. In his senior year, the accolades piled up, Brad says. He won, and this is just a few of them, nationally recognized All-American in all 3 sports. He was a Parade All-American quarterback, Touchdown Club of Atlanta's Back of the Week, and the TCA's Back of the Year. He was AJC First Team All-State and AJC's Back of the Year. His high school football exploits even made their way into newspapers in other states across the country and was even mentioned in Jet magazine. On the gridiron during his senior year, Flanagan combined for 51 touchdowns, 31 through the air and 20 on the ground. Now, to see a number like that these days, take it from a guy who works in covering high school football for a living, does play-by-play. I covered Deshaun Watson, who went for 50 plus, had very similar numbers just a couple of years ago. The quarterback, of course, at Clemson, one of the great quarterbacks in the state's history. Those were outstanding numbers just a couple of years ago. For Flanagan to do this in the 70s, absolutely astounding. 31 passing touchdowns and 20 on the ground. Flanagan was 6'3" and 195 as a senior, and he was one of the more highly sought after recruits in Georgia history. He chose the University of Georgia, signing a scholarship to play both basketball and football. Once at Georgia, he decided to stick to the hard court and averaged 12.8 points per ball game and led the team in assists as a true freshman. In 76, Flan would try his hand at football again and was part of the 1976 SEC champion Bulldogs. It's a very famous team in Bulldogs history. He was just a third-string quarterback that year, but did get some playing time, which, of course, you may already see where we're going with this, was extremely significant because he became the first University of Georgia black quarterback to ever play in a game, throw a pass, and score a touchdown. His senior season, he was poised to start on the hardwood and the gridiron, but it was not to be. He was declared academically ineligible in 77, and his playing days at the university were over. Amazingly, post-academia, he wasn't done playing. Brad goes on to tell us that he played basketball in the CBA. He played semi-pro football here in Atlanta, played in the USFL for the Boston Breakers, and even made the roster of the San Francisco 49ers in the early to mid-'80s. When his athletic career was over, he became a coach at JFK Middle School in the city of Atlanta. But in January of 2001, at the age of 45, Flanagan passed away. The greatest athlete debate, Brad goes on to say, is a difficult one to have. It is all subjective, and as the years pass, the legends grow. He says we will be having this debate throughout the year, and no doubt we'll never reach a consensus. I agree with that, Brad. But there is certainty that Anthony Flan the Man Flanagan has earned his place in the debate. Coming up next, we will give you a full-on schedule and some other pertinent information to the Georgia High School Basketball Championships coming up this week in Macon. Welcome back, everybody. I got to tell you something. This weekend coming up, the Georgia High School State Semifinals is going to be a great, great time. If you've never gone down yourself, taken your family, I got to tell you, it's a great experience. Weather's supposed to be good next weekend. You can head down to Macon. A lot of vendors come into town to shop their wares and shop their products. It really has become a bit of a tourist event. Remember, the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame is down in Macon. If you're an old Southern Rock fan, the Allman Brothers Museum's down there. You can tell I've been to Macon once or twice for the semifinals and the state championships. But in all seriousness, the three-day affair, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, the 5th through the 7th this year, is really going to be such a great, great event. Tickets are cheap. They're for all day, $12 all day. $12, one flat ticket for all-day admittance into the state championship games. In all seriousness, I love to joke around a lot here on the program, but in all seriousness, it's really a great weekend. And a lot of people are starting to do that, we find, in the media. I'll go down there to cover them. I'll just strike up a conversation with a stranger, and they'll say, oh, yeah, we came into town for the entire weekend. Our guys are playing on Friday, but we're here today. We're going to hit the Allman Brothers Museum, Georgia Sports Hall of Fame. We're going to go down to the river. It's really a great, great event. And again, it's becoming kind of a touristy, and not in the negative way, I mean, by the way, but a really good hometown touristy type thing where people from all across the Empire State of the South come into Macon to check out the three-day affair. And plus, just to have the chance to check out the Macon Coliseum is worth it as well. The Macon Centerplex, one of the more historic buildings in this entire state. Okay, so here's a look at the schedule. Again, it'll start on Thursday, March 5th, and run through Saturday, late by the way, Saturday, March 7th. Starting at 3 p.m., last tip will be at 8:45. There'll be a break for dinner, of course. 1A, public boys and girls, and 4A, boys and girls, on Thursday. The wheelchair championships will start our day on Friday the 6th at noon. Then the AA girls, AA boys, it's always girls and then boys, so AA and 5A on Friday. They'll start the basketball games. Wheelchair will play. They'll let them play out. They'll have a little break. And then 3 o'clock is when the 2A girls take the court. Saturday. That's where I was going. I wanted to get to it quick. I'm telling you something, folks. I try not to exaggerate. I know I've said that before, but I'm telling you, Saturday, March 7th, may end up being one of the great days in the history of Georgia high school basketball. Incredible, incredible matchups. 1A private girls and 1A private boys. So you're going to have St. Francis having both of their teams there. I talked about the history, the rivalry between St. Francis girls and Southwest Atlanta Christians girls. They'll be the first game of the day. Then St. Francis boys, one of the great teams today, taking on a really solid, underrated program in Green Forest. Then AAA Talked about AAA extensively. I was on the broadcast this past weekend. Unbelievable. We'll get to see Tukey Brown, the defending state champions, take on Jenkins. And then, of course, the night session, the 6A classification, Norcross versus McEachern on the girls' side, and Pebblebrook versus Wheeler on the guys' side. Expect Pebblebrook-Wheeler final to be 90-85, and that's no exaggeration. That's going to be an amazing, amazing ball game. Again, $12 per day for tickets at the Macon Coliseum. Tickets go on sale March 5th at 2 p.m. $10 to park your car, $15 to park your bus or stretch van. Finals will be broadcast live on GPB TV, so that'll either be 8 or 30 on your dial, or both. And keep in mind, if you're not going to be around a television that day, or at any point you want to check out some of the finals, you can watch them live at nfhsnetwork.com/GHSA. Again, that's nfhsnetwork.com/GHSA. And after the finals, of course, you can order DVDs, keepsake copies of said championships at nfhsnetwork.com/GHSA. Coming up next, I'll try to calm down and not riff on too many people in my take. There has been much debate over the last few years, more than ever before, and the thought of a shot clock in high school basketball. Now, there are numerous reasons that people will argue against the shot clock in high school basketball. One of my usual partners that I work with in calling high school sporting events here in the state, I'm one of the bigger guys in the state. I'm not bragging. What I mean by that is I call a lot of sports in this state. One guy that I work with all the time is Scott Janovitz, who used to work over at 790 when they had their local coverage. Scotty works for the NFHS Network. He hosts their Friday Night Footballs in the Southeast show, which you can watch at nfhsnetwork.com. He absolutely loathes the fact that the state of Georgia and National High School basketball does not have a shot clock. I more recently have regularly worked with my broadcast partner Justin Hanover, who also used to work at 790 The Zone when they had local coverage. He's a play-by-play guy and color analysis guy as well for the NFHS Network, and we've been working together for years. We kind of have a running gag, and we did over the last 2 days in Columbus. Again, I called the 2A and 3A state semifinals for basketball down in Columbus. And we've worked together for many years now in calling high school basketball, and we kind of have this running gag where we talk about, let's say a team gets a rebound in the final 25 seconds of the first quarter. And I'll turn to Justin and I'll say to him, okay, Justin, how many shots are we going to see out of these two teams in the last 25 seconds of this first quarter? And he'll say 5. Now that sounds like a lot. But here's the thing. Kids are not as patient offensively as they used to be. And it is very common. If any of you out there watching heard about the dramatics I was talking about in the What's Happening segment of our program, and you've decided to take me up on my offer of going to nfhsnetwork.com and watching any of the archived broadcasts, or potentially watching the state championship matchups on GPB or the NFHS Network, take note of this. Watch just how many shots you'll see out of the two teams, especially on the girls' side, in the final minute, 30 seconds, 15 seconds even, of a particular quarter. These teams are not as patient as they used to be. So do we really need a shot clock? I don't know. I am personally one of these guys who would rather see it than not see it. Now, part of the reason that the NFHS and Georgia in particular has also fought this is because they say, well, then the smaller schools or schools with less money, they'll have to buy a shot clock. For me, I say, I get that. I understand it'll cost money. But in the end, the benefits outweigh the rewards, and the benefits outweigh the negative part of spending the money. But then again, I can truly play devil's advocate with myself and say, Chris, you've called so many games over the years. When was the last time you saw a team actually wait the last 20 seconds, 25 seconds of a first quarter for that last second shot? And the answer, of course, is very few times. We saw that a lot this weekend in Columbus, and it was a point of conversation from GHSA people, fans, and for those of us in the media who would meet in between ball games and before and after the sessions. We talked about just how many shots we would see in such a short time frame. It's really quite amazing. The kids are not quite as patient as they used to be. Really, the best reason to have the shot clock is to keep people from stalling in the last 4 minutes of a ball game, to force a team with just a 4-point lead to shoot the basketball. So really, we only need a shot clock for the fourth quarter in a close ball game when a team's trying to stall. Until 2 weeks from now, we're going to take next week off, but in 2 weeks, we'll have a full recap of all the state championship basketball games from the Macon Centerplex. And until then, I'm Chris Mooneyham for the TCA All Sports Report.